Hello, welcome to Truth for Today. This is Daiqing Yuan, your host and teacher, pastor of Abilene Bible Church. Today we're continuing our study of Daniel. Our title is When the Honor of God is at Issue, Belshazzar and the Writing on the Wall. The text is Daniel chapter 5. This is our mini-series number 7 in our series on Daniel, because we had 2 introductions. Overall, the book of Daniel is about the kingdom of God, how the visible kingdom, which is Israel, had fallen. And then there will be a Gentile time, and then, however, at the end, there will be a restoration for Israel. So the book was written in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Hebrew again. The Aramaic part of the book has an onion-like structure. It's called chiastic structure. In Greek, chi is the X, so it's symmetric. There are 3 layers. Chapter 2 and 7 are about the sovereign Lord, setting the course of history. Chapters 3 and 6 are about the faithful believers, preserved by God. Chapters 4 and 5 are about the prideful kings will be humiliated. We just studied chapter 4 about Nebuchadnezzar. He's, although second king, but he's the most important king of New Babylonian Empire. And now we're talking about, in chapter 5, Belshazzar, who is the last king. He actually is the co-regent with his father, but anyway, he's the last ruler of the same empire. So from beginning to the end of this great, maybe greatest empire of all times, New Babylonian Empire in terms of absolute power, and its prideful kings were humiliated. So in the beginning of the book, it talks about the captivity of Daniel in the first captivity of Judah, and then together with him, the vessels in the temple of God were taken by Nebuchadnezzar as kind of a memorabilia. In ancient times, the conquering kingdoms, they take the gods or images, the idols of the conquered kingdoms, while in Israel, the God, Yahweh, has no idol. So that's why they took the vessels. These vessels were just stored up in the storeroom. However, at the end of the kingdom, it was used by Belshazzar. Now, last time when we met, we mentioned the rise of Cyrus the Persian. Cyrus had a very legendary life, and the reason is because the Bible predicted him. God said that he will raise up such a person. God named him by name in the book of Isaiah twice, and about 1.5 centuries before he was born. So Cyrus is from Persia. However, he was the crown prince of Media. He inherited the throne of Media. He conquered Lydia, and he conquered New Babylonia for his father-in-law and uncle, Cyrus II, who was called Darius the Mede. Okay, so these Lydia, the nations of Lydia, was founded 722 BC, the year when Israel was taken into captivity. The year of Media was founded in 700 BC, and then the year of New Babylonia, 625 BC. So when Israel was taken out of the picture, out of the stage of the world history, God has raised up the Gentile nations to discipline Israel, and these are all part of God's plan. For God sets up all authorities on earth. For the nation of New Babylonia was founded by Nebuchadnezzar, but is in 605 led by Nebuchadnezzar that he annihilated and the empire of the Assyria and replaced it with New Babylonia, a new superpower of the world. So Nebuchadnezzar ruled for 43 years. Then his son from his new wife was the king briefly for 2 years. Then his son-in-law from one of his daughters ruled for 4 years. Then his son ruled for 2 months. Then another son-in-law of Nebuchadnezzar, Nabonidus, became king. However, he likes to be an archaeologist and temple builder, so he let his son Belshazzar rule the kingdom. He was the co-regent, and at the end, when his father was captured by Cyrus, Belshazzar probably lifted himself up to become the regent or co-rex, and that's when the party happened and the vessels were used. All right, now let's talk about the hubris of Belshazzar. Belshazzar's party could be his enthronement, in celebrating his elevation from a regent, having the power but not the name of the king, to a vice-rex or rex, having both power and name. The highest when his father was still alive. He was a co-regent. Then when his father was captured, he was the regent. Well, maybe already before his father left the kingdom for him. But now his father was captured, and so he became vice-rex or rex. A co-rex has the name but not the power. A crown prince has neither the name nor the power. So these are the ranks of the kings. You have a crown prince, neither name nor power. Co-rex has the name but not the power. Regent has the power but not the name. And vice-rex or rex, they have both power and name. So ancient kings have these different ranks, and that's why some of them register their reign length from the time when they become king. Sometimes they register later when their father died. So that told us about their ranks. Okay, and now Belshazzar brought out the vessels from the temple of Yahweh, and maybe from more temples of other gods whose country the Babylonians conquered. He did this to show that Babylon, the city of Babylon, was invincible under the protection of Marduk, their chief god. So the more idols or vessels from the temples of the other gods he was using, the more he's glorifying his own god, Marduk. And the more he glorifies his God, he believes that the more his city will be protected by his God. So this is a time when the honor of the true God is at issue. Okay, so will God fight for his honor? Well, we'll see. Okay, so here are the text of the Daniel 5, verse 3. Then they brought the gold vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God, which was in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives and his concubines drank from them. They drank the wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone. In other words, idols made by man's hands. Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of a great statue made from the same material, gold, silver, bronze, iron, and of course feet is mud and clay. So it's the same thing that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of are what idols that Belshazzar praised. And the symbol of the conglomerate human civilization was broken by the rock from heaven in Daniel 2. So that was that great statue. It's the materials made of the body decreases in value, even increases in strength. But when it's in the feet, it has neither value nor strength. And the hubris of this lesser king than Nebuchadnezzar will be checked by God. You see, the last king of the empire was actually a lesser king than his founding, in a sense, his founding father. But this lesser king was had more hubris, and he was prideful, and he was honoring false gods. And now there is a terrifying manifestation. Verse 5. Suddenly, the fingers of a man's hand emerged and began writing opposite the lampstand on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the back of the hand that did the writing. Then the king's face grew pale, and his thoughts alarmed him, and his hip joints went slack, and his knees began knocking together. The king called aloud to bring in the conjurers, the Chaldeans, and the diviners. The king spoke and said to the wise men of Babylon, "Any man who can read this inscription and explain its interpretation to me shall be clothed with purple and have a necklace of gold around his neck and have authority as third ruler in the kingdom." You see, he offered the position of the third ruler because he was the second. His father was still alive, the first. So he's honoring a position second only to himself. Okay, and when he saw this image, a hand writing on the wall, and without a body, and he couldn't understand the message, he's scared. Fear overtook his soul and his body, and his knees started knocking at each other. We know that is extreme fear. So he called these so-called wise men who supposed to know the supernatural world, connect to the supernaturals, and he asked any man who can explain it would be raised up to a rank second only to the Corex. Okay. Now here is a rendition of the situation by Rembrandt, the great painter from great Dutch painter, and of course Rembrandt lived in the 17th century, and he 17th, 18th century, I forgot. But anyway, his understanding of the past was limited. He wrote the message. You see, there was a hand, and he wrote the message in the square Hebrew letters or Aramaic letters. It read Mana, Mane, Tekal U Far Sin. Okay, but he wrote it downwards when he should have written horizontally, left to right to left. But anyway, that's a rendition. That's an artistic imagination. Okay, now about the inability to decipher. Verse 8. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the inscription or make known its interpretation to the king. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed. His face grew even paler, and his nobles were perplexed. The queen entered the banquet hall, and because of the words of the king and his nobles, the queen spoke and said, okay, first of all, the message was written in Aramaic, and at that time, the Aramaic and Hebrew, they used the same letters, but they only had consonants, and they had no vowels, and they also have no separation between the words. And if you put in different vowels, if you divide the sequence differently, then you can have different meanings. So see here it says mane tekal ufarsin. That is one way of defining it. Mane tekal ufarsin. But if you divide it differently, you can have different meanings. Scholars have invented many ways, many interpretations. The queen mentioned here was actually the queen of Nabonidus, the actual king, the father of Belshazzar. The queen, she is the queen mother of Belshazzar, who is a daughter of Nebuchadnezzar with Nitocris. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar had a queen first. Historical documents said that she was Nitocris, and then he married another who is the princess from Media, and that's Amethyst, that was her name. So Amethyst's son became the heir. That's the contract when they made peace between the nations. And however, when he died, his brother-in-law, okay, in other words, the evil Merodach's brother-in-law, who is his sister's husband. Yeah, and his sister is from Nebuchadnezzar and another queen. Okay, so this queen was one of the two daughters of Nebuchadnezzar and Nitocris. One of the son-in-laws became king for a while, then his son, and then when they all passed, it's another son-in-law, which was the current king in name. That's called Nabonidus. Okay, and his queen, his wife, would be the queen mother of the Belshazzar, the current co-rex. Okay, and when we say the king, it's in a general sense. Okay, because he's the ruler, he's the regent, maybe co-rex, maybe even rex, but he's not the actual king. Okay, the queen said, "O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts alarm you or your face be pale. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is a spirit of the holy gods. And in the days of your father, illumination, insight, and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And the king Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, appointed him chief of the magicians, conjurers, Chaldeans, and diviners. This was because an extraordinary spirit, knowledge, and insight, interpretation of dreams, explanation of enigmas, and solving of difficult problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Let Daniel now be summoned, and he will declare the interpretation." You see, the queen mother was talking to her son, but her son is now the king. Well, the co-rex, how about that? He says, "You live forever," so you honor the one who's on the throne, even though she's the mother. "And do not let your thoughts trouble you," okay, because King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, well, this word, your father, could mean your ancestor, because that would be the queen mother's father. Okay, that will be Belshazzar's grandfather. Okay, he says, Nebuchadnezzar, your grandfather. How about that? Your grandfather, the great king, okay, appointed Daniel as the chief of the magicians, conjurers, Chaldeans, and diviners. Okay, because he had something special in him, and call him, even though he's renamed Belteshazzar, I know his name is Daniel. Okay, let this man Daniel be summoned, and let him declare the interpretation. So the queen mother had full knowledge and full confidence in the ability of Daniel. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar was the father of Belshazzar as in the sense of predecessor, possibly grandfather, and he was a typical man of hubris. Okay, because he was proud, he was disciplined with 7 years of bovinization. Remember, so now the grandson has similar hubris, and they all need an interpreter of visions from who has the spirit of the true God. All right. Now the calling of Daniel. Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king spoke and said to Daniel, "Are you that Daniel who's one of the exiles from Judah, whom my father the king brought from Judah? Now I have heard about you that a spirit of the gods is in you, and that illumination, insight, and extraordinary wisdom have been found in you. Just now the wise men and the conjurers were brought before me, that they might read this inscription and make its interpretation known to me. But they could not declare the interpretation of the message. but I personally have heard about you, that you are able to give interpretations and solve difficult problems. Now, if you are able to read the inscription and make its interpretations known to me, you will be clothed with purple and wear a necklace of gold around your neck, and you will have authority as the third ruler in the kingdom. Okay, so he did not mention the spirit of the holy gods as the queen did. He said the spirit of the gods in you, because he didn't have understanding that there is one God above all gods, actually being the only true God. I think the queen mother, who was a daughter of Nebuchadnezzar, who saw everything her father experienced, probably had more understanding than this son. Anyway, he said some good words to Daniel. He said, if you are able to interpret this to me, because these people, they can see the message, but they cannot interpret it. If you can read it and interpret it, I will lift you up. Okay, I will clothe you with purple. Purple was a very expensive clothing color, and it meant royalty or nobility. And gold necklace, I guess, very thick and heavy gold necklace would mean wealth, so it will be rank and wealth. So he offered Daniel a big reward for being able to interpret the message, because he was dying to understand it. Now, a reminder on Nebuchadnezzar. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, keep your gifts for yourself, or give your rewards to someone else. However, I will read the inscription to the king and make the interpretation known to him. O king, the Most High God granted sovereignty, grandeur, glory, and majesty to Nebuchadnezzar your father. Because of the grandeur which he bestowed on him, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language feared and trembled before him. Whomever he wished he killed, and whomever he wished he spared alive, and whomever he wished he elevated, and whomever he wished he humbled. So Nebuchadnezzar was a much greater king. He had absolute power. But, verse 20, when his heart was lifted up and his spirit became so proud that he behaved arrogantly, he was deposed from his royal throne, and his glory was taken away from him. He was also driven away from mankind, and his heart was made like that of beasts, and his dwelling place was with the wild donkeys. He was given grass to eat like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven, until he recognized that the Most High God is ruler over the realm of mankind, and that he set over it whomever he wishes. You see, Nebuchadnezzar, his hubris was checked by God. Even he became humbled before the true God. So Daniel is saying, hey, king, your grandfather, who was a greater king, he was humbled when he became proud. So you don't repeat that. Yet you, verse 22, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, even though you knew all this. But you have exalted yourself against the Lord of heaven, and they have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines have been drinking wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see, hear, or understand, but the God in whose hands are your life breath and your ways you have not glorified. Then the hand was sent from him, and this inscription was written out. Okay, so the writing on the wall is God checking the hubris of Belshazzar. Now, verse 25, Daniel is solving the puzzle. Now this is the inscription that was written out. Many, many, tekel upharsin. This is the interpretation of the message. Many means God has numbered your kingdom and put an end to it. Tekel, that means you have weighed on the scales and found deficient. Perez, that means your kingdom has been divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians. Okay. So Daniel read many tekel upharsin, as we just said, many tekel Perez. Many was repeated, maybe as a hint. So many is measure, and tekel means weighed, and the Perez is divide, and when it's plural, it's upharsin. So many is also a weight of money, is mina, which equals to 60 shekels. Tekel is 1 shekel. Perez is half a shekel or half a mina. It just means half. Upharsin, that means 2 halves. So when you have 2 half shekels, that's 1 shekel. So when you have 60 plus 1 plus 2 halves, you get 62. Okay, interesting. So first of all, it tells that your kingdom is ending. The next, it mentioned the number 62. Then Belshazzar gave orders, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a necklace of gold around his neck, and issued a proclamation concerning him that he now has authority as the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. That same night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was slain. You see, Belshazzar kept his promise by making Daniel the 3rd highest ruler in the kingdom. God kept his promise by letting Belshazzar being deposed and killed in the same night. That night was Sunday, Tishri 16th, and October 11th, 539 BC. These are from Babylonian Chronicles. Cyrus' army diverted the Euphrates River and came in through the waterway. You see, the city was impregnable. It was so thick you can ride 10 chariots parallel. It's so high as 100 feet. But it sits upon a river. And when Cyrus' army diverted the river, they came in through the waterway and they killed Belshazzar that night. Okay, so Darius the Mede received the kingdom at about the age of 62. Now, interesting, the number 62 just appeared, right? Many plus tekel plus upharsin means 60 plus 1 plus 2 halves, that means 62. It was Cyrus who conquered the city, directly commanded by a general called Ugabaru or Gubaru. So sometimes we say Cyrus, sometimes it's Gubaru, but they were all Median armies, generals, and they are doing it for the Median king. And he was called Darius the Mede in the Bible. He is Cyrus II in secular history. He received the kingdom from Cyrus and reigned for 2 years, 539 to 537 BC, as the king of the United Kingdom of Babylon, Media, and Lydia. So when God's honor is at issue, God will defend it with his almighty power, and God always wins. Amen.